I'm not sure what makes a main villain mascot more terrifying, the fact that it's in full CGI or the fact that it's a kind of visual cross between Bob the Builder and Chucky. They're both terrifying, but this is my thoughts on Tomodachi Game, a series that is airing in the spring 2022 anime season. This is my thoughts on it. So let's jump right into it. Tomodachi Game, or loosely translated Friend Game, essentially follows a group of 5 friends, and they all are in the same classroom. And this classroom is currently kind of saving up a bunch of money. Each student is giving up a certain amount of money in order to go to this big field trip. But unfortunately, that money gets stolen. And so they're kind of passing around a little bit of blame. And eventually, the two of the friends in this group end up disappearing. They were the 2 that are actually the class reps. They were kind of keeping the money and gathering it all together, so it kind of seemed odd the 2 of them disappeared. But shortly later, one of these friends, Yuichi, gets a letter at his house from one of them saying, "Come to the school, I need to talk to you about something." He arrives there and they're all there. All the 5 of these friends all got letters from each other to come there. Well, as they're trying to figure out what happened, they all get kidnapped and taken to this secluded building where they become a part of what they call Tomodachi Game. And this is all presented to them by this Manabu-kun, this mascot thing that comes out of nowhere. Like I said earlier, full CGI, looks creepy as hell, does not match the art style whatsoever. This Manabu-kun comes out and starts talking about this game, and he explained it as essentially a game where they're all going to work off debt. They all have, there's essentially this prize for 20 million yen, and they can gain this 20 million yen, which is essentially about, it's not exactly, but it's shorter than $200,000 USD. But whoever wins this game will gain that money. And he's claiming that one of these friends needs that money. They have a debt. One of these 5 students has a debt of 20 million yen. And so while they're all asking, I don't want to be a part of this, can we leave? He's like, well, would you want to do that? If you leave, and if everybody quits, you're all going to get a split of that debt. So each one of them, all 5 of them, they're each going to get a portion of this 4 million yen debt if they leave. So it's kind of one of those, probably want to do this. What this also kind of stirs within this group of 5 people is, despite the fact that they're all friends, but they're starting to wonder if this person in their group, their friendship group, has a 20 million yen debt. Were they the one that stole the money that was gathered together for the trip? And why wouldn't they tell them? Quickly, some of them are kind of trying to be mediators. You have Shihos going, look, we shouldn't ask. We shouldn't pry. If one of us has this debt, we really shouldn't force them to have to bring it up. And as Yuichi, who's pretty much the main character of the show, most of the focus of the inner dialogue is around him. He is essentially the main focus of the show. He's the one that's always had money problems. And in this whole situation, he's starting to have some doubts. You kind of have these little recollection of his history where it seems like one parental figure, it seems like his father, was trying to instill upon him that the greatest importance in life is money. He also has this other parental figure, which I'm assuming is his mother. It doesn't really necessarily say. She was instilling upon him that the most important thing in life is friends. So he has sort of an inner conflict between these 2 things. And as he's debating this in his own mind, Manabu-kun attaches to him and says, "You want to do this for your friend, right? Or is money more important to you?" Well, during this kind of struggle that he's having, they ultimately all decide, let's do it. Let's do this Tomodachi Game. Let's see if whoever had this debt, see if we could pay that off, and let's get out of here scot-free. Well, it doesn't necessarily specifically say that, but we're supposed to assume because the show is kind of moving on quickly. Where I'm already getting into my thoughts of the show. It just they go with it. They decide to do it. Well, this starts a series of events. We've already had pretty much in the first 2 episodes, 2 different games. The first game was a Kokori-san game where they essentially all gather around this table. They put their fingers on this coin, and the coin will go to either yes or no, depending on what they all decide. It seems like it's weighted one direction or the other. They all have to be of the same mind to essentially pass this game. Well, each one of them has to ask a question. They're given cards, and each one takes turn reading this card out loud, and then they have to respond to it, but they can't speak outside of that. So it becomes a kind of a mind game where they can't communicate to each other, but they all kind of have to trust each other. And the second game, I forget what it was called. I've never heard of it before. They essentially have to each take turns going into this booth and either leaving a card blank or writing something negative about one of the other friends. And then each one of these cards will be read out loud, and some sort of godlike jury system will essentially decide if they're true or not. And if they're true, they get to move forward. So it's almost like you have to make fun of your friends or bash your friends, and they will be able to move forward quicker, and whoever reaches the end gets the debt. And upon this entire game process, what we're essentially establishing, and Manabu says it early on, this game, you will lose if you do not trust your friends. It's already kind of establishing early on, this whole concept is the idea of putting friendships through a trial. And if you can't trust your friends, you will lose, because you're going to have to sort of need to have a trust. And not only that, but a trust that they will trust you, because each one of these games seems to sort of be centered around the idea of instilling doubt upon you about your friends, and additionally, their doubt upon you. And any kind of signals you can give or issues you may uncover will instill doubt upon everybody as a whole. So to get into my thoughts on Tomodachi Game, I am very, very mixed on this show through and through. I think that my initial issue that I really faced when starting the show, and it's kind of been sticking with me throughout the first 2 episodes, and I think it's going to stick throughout the entire series, is I don't believe that they're friends. Like, the show jumps way too quick into the Tomodachi Game, and the whole concept of the game is that these friends are being tested upon their friendships. My first impressions with them is that they're not friends. Like, the whole idea is that this is a game that tests the validity and the strength of your bonds and your friendships upon each other. And again, my first impressions is to immediately jump into a game where they're immediately tearing into each other. So I don't believe they're friends. Like, I honestly, at this point, I have never established any sort of bond with their bond. And that creates a big issue with the storytelling overall. I'm not sure if this is the case in the manga. I'm assuming it is, because how else are you going to link people into watching a story about a game against friendships unless you sell that in the first volume or at least the first chapter? So I assume that it jumps right into it. But the difficulty is the only scenes that I got with them being in a friendship and a bond before they got into the game was one interaction. One scene where Yuichi got the money he needed for the trip, and they're all saying, you know, hey man, good job. And then bam, they're in the game. So it's like, I don't know. I don't know that they're friends. And it's so in Yuichi's head at this point, which obviously it's going to be. I think they're really hitting really quickly that Yuichi is sort of somebody that does have this inner conflict between friendships and money, because he's always been poor, or at least we're supposed to believe that. I mean, at this point, anybody can be anybody. It's already kind of, the show is already really hitting heavy on this idea of two-facedness. Everybody has two faces. Obviously, Yuichi has two faces. He has money and he has friendships. Shiho is two-faced. She wants to be everybody's friend, but at the same time, she wants to love, and she wants to use people. Shiba doesn't really understand relationships, and he really does kind of push himself upon people without realizing that he's harming other people. Tenji apparently had feelings for Shiho, but he never really expressed it properly, or we're supposed to assume. Yutori likes to be kind of the middle person and is sort of a victim, but at the same time has her own desires and is extremely jealous, but doesn't show it. Everybody has two faces, but that's essentially what it's going for. That's what this show is going for. That's what the story is going for. It's this idea of, can you trust people when you finally reveal their other face? And I think, let's be honest, the first episode with the whole Kokori thing, it was all about Yuichi's two-facedness. It was all about him not trusting other people. It was all about him and his own desires and his self-preservation coming out. But then they all try to be friends again. And then it gets to the second episode, and it gets into the next game, and it's just like, at this point, I don't even know why they're friends. At this point, it's like, everything's being revealed. And it's like, at that point, do I really want to root for anybody? Do I feel like I should root for anybody? And that's kind of that second issue that I have with the show, is because I haven't formed bonds with them, because I haven't established their friends, because I don't believe they're friends, now that everything's hitting the fan, I don't have anybody I care for. There's the problem. When you have a death game and you don't care who wins, you have an issue. Now I can establish that. I'm fully welcoming the idea that getting into the second game, when crap starts hitting the fan, somebody stands up and does something good, I'll probably root for them. But after you watch so many of these death games, it's really hard to even expect that to happen. Especially Yuichi, which he's supposed to be the main character. I think it is trying to go for this idea that Yuichi's kind of self-preservation is coming out. He's realizing that there's probably another side to everybody's story, and so he's already questioning his friends. And it's kind of bringing out of him a self-preservation that's almost a genius. Like, he's bringing out this genius side of him that's going to figure out the situation and figure out how he can come out on top, how he can figure out who is the mole. It's already hinting at this idea that one of them is a mole. One of them is the bad guy, so to speak. Which one is that? That's going to be the question mark. Which, I mean, based off the first shot of the first episode, I'm assuming it's going to end up being Yuichi, but it's like, are we being that obvious already that in the end it's going to be Yuichi pretty much ruining everybody else and to get on top. Is it that obvious? But we'll see. It's not as if this show is doing anything inherently offensive to me. I don't mind it so much so far. Like I said, I think its big faults so far is just that I don't believe they're friends. It didn't sell me on that quick enough, and I don't like any of them. I don't like any of the characters, and that makes an issue for it. I think what most death games do to kind of supplement the idea of I don't like any of these characters is they'll replace it with just kind of really good writing. This kind of geniusness in characters where they have twists and turns in how they respond to things. And I think that's what they're probably going to do with Yuichi. Now, the problem that comes with that is that whenever he has these genius moves, everybody seems to know. like Yuichi realizes something about the cards, and then suddenly everybody's like, oh, he noticed it. And it's like, how do they know that he noticed it? Did they read his mind? My assumption to correct that is that Manabu and these two observers in this other room, maybe there's a certain power within this world that they can read the minds, because technically Kokori is supposedly controlling their thought processes. They think something, and Kokori is supposed to be sussing out the answer. So there's I guess a supernatural element in the world itself. So maybe that's why they know when Yuichi's figuring things out and they can respond to it. But I don't know. We'll see. With the third episode, I think it's going to be extremely telling. I almost wanted to wait to do my first impressions until the third episode, because I think that's when, I mean, with the second episode's ending, the crap was hitting the fan. Everybody was starting to realize that, I liked her, you liked him, you didn't realize I liked you, and then they're starting to throw shade on each other. So if their friendships get past the third episode, I'd be extremely shocked, because they're all just basically throwing dirt on each other at this moment. So maybe that whole idea of the makeup friendship after, not the other makeup thing, but the makeup friendship, like, if they can at least show all of their wounds, if they can at least figure out how terrible they think of each other, maybe the idea of honesty will create stronger bonds going forward. We got that out of the way. I understand you now. I see how you see me. It's not true, or this is true. Let's be friends going forward. There is an element that when you have a falling out with certain people, you get stronger afterwards. Like you've gotten that out of your system. You've figured each other out, and you're able to move on better. And maybe that's what they're going for. That could be possibly what the idea of it going forward is going to be, because otherwise I don't really necessarily see this being much of a friend game beyond this. Visually, I already kind of made my jokes about Manabu-kun. CGI doesn't match the world itself. He's kind of weird though, so it kind of works out in the end. Other than that, it's very basic. It's very plain looking. It's not really going for much detail in this particular world, so it's very subpar animation and visuals. Additionally, the music's all over the place. I don't know I need to look it up who's doing like the music directing or whatever, because holy crap, the music's just all over the place. Sometimes it's super hyper techno something and it's not matching the scene, and other times it's just whimsical. It's just, the music's all over the place. It doesn't fit half the scenes, but other than that, I'm keeping watching it. We'll see where it goes from here. It's definitely one of my is one of my least offensive visually and storytelling wise death games I've run into so far. So I'll definitely be sticking with it. But at any rate, I hope you guys enjoyed this in first impressions. If you did, leave a like down below, comment. Let me know what's thought of the series if you're going to be checking it out. Subscribe if you haven't already so you can check out all my videos. I do first impressions of all the shows of the season, as well as do news coverage, topic videos, top 10 lists, all that kind of stuff. If it's anime, it's here, basically. Additionally, if you want to support us more, we have a Patreon link and a tips link in the description below, as well as a merch site. We definitely appreciate everybody that supports us, and y'all take care.